Thank you. 2012 to 2014, my husband Grant Franks, also a tutor at St. John's, went to this Chinese high school in order to try out a St. John's program with Chinese high school students. All of our students spoke English. These were students who were on their way to becoming college students in the United States. This is a picture of our classroom building. Though they spoke English, they had never, many of them, maybe even all of them, encountered a teacher who didn't also speak Chinese. So it was cross-cultural conversation without a net for both of us. This was a view from our neighborhood. It shows Beijing, highly modernized city, eager to grow, wanting to have these big buildings. This big Sino steel building was our sort of lodestone as we wandered around Beijing. They want to be modern, but this is what it looks like, the same scene on a polluted day, which happened easily 3 or 4 times a month. So there are doubts about modernity. There are doubts about the West. There are doubts about where China should be in the world. And this was the context in which China began to experiment with liberal education. This is old China, the Summer Palace, which was near our school. It's a beautiful place where the Qing emperors used to come during the summer. It's filled with signs about how it had to be restored because the British and the French destroyed so much of it in the middle of the 19th century. Again, part of the doubts about China and its future. This is just an image we captured at the Summer Palace. This is the daughter of a friend of ours. It looks like, I don't know what she was thinking, but it looks like she's choosing between the communism and the imperial nature of China. And the question of what China's identity is part of that kind of choice. Still firmly communist. Clearly the party is in charge, no reason to think that will ever change, but the whole society is changing in character, wanting to have capitalism with Chinese characteristics. So we brought our little Western classics experiment to China. I conducted what I called a seminar on change, since change is so much at the heart of what every Chinese person is experiencing these days, even more than for us. We had St. John-style great books. We started with the Iliad. This, of course, was their image of Achilles. But Achilles became a friend. He was the greatest warrior who wondered about the best life, whether he was living the best life. Now, in China, if you think of a great warrior, here's who you think of. This is Guan Yu, comes from a book called The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, absolutely wonderful book, and he's the greatest warrior in China. And we had wonderful conversations about how Guan Yu works in society more like an archetype rather than an agent of change. So, we get to the changing part of Achilles, where he wonders about whether he wants to grow into something else and asked each other, what is the best life? First answer was always the best life was to be rich. But we talked a lot about how, and I think students were persuaded that being rich might not be the best life. Many of our students came here. We also went on, we studied the Oresteia. I was astonished when we reenacted the trial that they came out even on Orestes' guilt, just like Aeschylus did. We looked at the Metamorphosis, a Roman book about the identity of Rome. When Rome stopped being a republic, was it still Rome? China's gone the other way. This is a picture of something that happens at every Chinese tourist place. People like to dress up like the emperor. The imperial China is still an enormous part of Chinese identity, despite the overlay of Marxism. We encountered this conversation when we went to a conference called the First Annual Chinese Conference on the Liberal Arts in China. And they were talking about the liberal arts and what place they could hold in China. China is very concerned. The whole society is arguing about a thing called the Needham question. the Needham question posed by a British sinologist, why did the scientific revolution happen in the West and not the East when we invented everything first? And some people believe, there are lots of possible answers to that question, some people believe that an answer to the question is the liberal arts, that an education in the humanities promotes a kind of critical thinking that encourages creativity in a way that a technology-focused education does not. So China is experimenting with that. In that experiment, it looked to me, at least from my particular St. John's perspective, that these kids loved it. As I say, 6 or 7 of these Chinese high school students chose to come to St. John's and talk more about the humanities, about critical thinking. I think it's possible that this kind of conversation, which China is a little ambivalent about, you can be critical or you can be subversive, but encouraging to some extent, can be something that St. John's, really, we have some skill here. We have something to offer here. We have something, a conversational ability to help people talk among cultures about the human. So this is just a picture of my book. Thank you.